was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear it and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny ST, and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. On our show, we interview Israeli and Palestinian peace organizations. There are literally hundreds of peace organizations working together at the grassroots level, many for decades. We believe that the voice of reason should be louder than the extremists that we see on our TV sets. Don't you? We want to show the world that there is hope for peace in the Middle East. We're committed to giving a platform to the organizations that are working to make that dream a reality. We've had over 75 interviews with incredible organizations, and we thank you for your interest. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we've loved bringing the work of these extraordinary peace organizations to you. Today, we'll be speaking with Todd Morehead and Justin Kron, co-producers of Hope in the Holy Land, the film and the series. Hope in the Holy Land captures the story of Todd Morehead, an American Christian with a deep love for Israel, who sets off on a journey across the Holy Land to confront his indifference toward the Palestinians and to search for the deeper truths behind one of the most perplexing and polarizing conflicts in the world. Along the way, he discovers the painful struggles of Jews, Muslims, and Christians on both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian divide. The result is an enlightening journey that exposes viewers to perspectives rarely seen in the media, and a challenge to a man's heart to love his enemy. When we spoke with the two of you about your film originally, it was just about to be released in May 2021, as Palestinian-Israeli violence had again begun to peak. So much has happened since then, and now you even have Hope in the Holy Land, a 6-part series. I can't wait to hear how it went after you released the film until now. Welcome and congratulations on the release of your film and the first episode of your new series.
Thank you, Penny. Great to be back with you.
Okay, I think let's start with playing the trailer for Hope in the Holy Land to get a feel for the movie. That be okay?
Sounds great.
You are completely misrepresenting and stereotyping based on your connections. No.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is one of the most polarizing subjects in the world. As a Christian, I've always supported Israel's claim to the Holy Land. To me, the Palestinians were just getting in the way of God's plan. But the way I viewed the other side created a conflict within me.
There's about 57 Muslim states in the world. There's one Jewish state.
The massive ingathering of Jews in the last 150 years back to the land is absolutely unprecedented.
They say that there's no greater sign of redemption coming than the Jewish people returning to the hills of Judea.
I cannot comprehend in any way God's will for a certain group of people having to deal directly with the suffering of another people.
300,000 Palestinians are unemployed.
Most Palestinians have only seen Israeli soldiers and settlers, and I tell you, they are not very friendly.
I don't hate, but if you throw a stone at me or try and stab me, I will kill you.
Can you imagine as a child you grew up in the Palestinian society, all what has been heard about the Jews, they want to kill us, they want to drink our blood, so what I felt is full of bitterness, full of hate.
امسك صهيوني ولا اسرائيلي بقتلك تموت. انا بكرههم.
I don't think that people hate Palestinians. People don't want just to live. They don't want to die.
انا بني ادم جايك من برا حابه افرجي صوره الطرفين. انت اللي بيجي يصور قضيتك كان قاعد تطرد فيه.
If God cancels his promises to Israel, then I'm in trouble.
It's not that this land belongs to me, it's that I belong to the land, meaning that others can belong to the land also. So we're here and they're here, we're neighbors.
Nelson Mandela said, enemies, when they will walk together, they will break the wall between them.
God look on all the people the same. Jewish people, they like you. It's the same.
In spite of all the years of conflict, there are people here rising above the hurts of the past to speak the truth and be lights in the darkness. There's hope here if you know where to look for it.
Absolutely, there's hope. We're speaking on Peace with Penny with Justin Kron, who co-produced the film Hope in the Holy Land with Todd Morehead, which I believe is one of the most fair presentations of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that I've seen. We recently finished recording his interview, and now, unfortunately, the Israel war has started after they were monstrously attacked. And I wanted to give him an opportunity to comment about it. Hi, Justin. How are you doing?
Hi, Penny. I wish I could say it's good to be back with you, but unfortunately, in these times, it isn't. I wish we were speaking at a completely different time in history, but we're together again, and it's good that we get to chat a little bit more about the current situation that's unfolding, every day over in Israel.
Right. Never know what is going to happen, and most of it is not good. Have you spoken to any of your Israeli or Palestinian friends that you met while making the film?
I have been in touch with a couple of Palestinians, several of my Israeli Jewish and Israeli Arab friend. So, depending upon where they're at, their situation's a little bit different. My friends in the Palestinian territories in the West Bank have mentioned that there's a number of protests that are going on. Certainly, there's heightened security I should mention that they themselves were absolutely appalled, disgusted by the actions of Hamas against the Israelis on October 7th. I think that's very important. I would assume that other people that you've spoken with have mentioned that there should be a clear distinction between Hamas and the Palestinian people. Many,
Correct.
if not most, who do not support or sympathize with their actions, their barbaric actions on October 7th. So, my Israeli friends, I think they're very shook up about what occurred.
Yeah, so many people are in shock that I've talked to. They're still, of course, in shock. It's a devastating situation.
Yeah, and I think it should be mentioned, many of them are disappointed
yes,
with what's happened with the security situation, or the failure of the security. A lot of questions revolving around that.
Yes.
Some are feeling that even Benjamin Netanyahu is a little disengaged from those who are on the ground. That's probably because he doesn't want to get screamed at by some people for either the security failures or because of their feelings related to the tension over the judicial reform, which was the focal point of the news for several months leading up to this. But of course now the focus needs to be on uniting and combating Israel's enemies.
Right. I know everyone I speak with knows someone who's been killed, injured, or kidnapped. It's
Or who's
especially
had a soldier, or who's had someone called up to the IDF.
that's true too. There's a lot of so many people have volunteered. You come from outside the country back. I was just talking to someone who was upset because he's aged out, if you will, but he is looking at different ways to volunteer. He was talking about how, for instance, he was considering teaching again in the schools because they're missing so many teachers who went to fight. It's
and a lot of things have closed. A lot of the national parks in Israel have closed. One, not just because, of course, tourism is completely stopped, but because many of those who work in the national parks have been called up to serve. I have a couple of friends here in Chicago who the day after, on October 8th, were called up and are in process of making their way back. So, and one is leaving his wife, his American wife here. So, this is even affecting Americans. Of course, we know there's Americans who are held hostage, several of them.
Well,
and so many people throughout the world are have been impacted.
I will say that, and I just wrote an article today that I published. When we go to synagogue, it feels like an armed camp between all the security that they have to have there because of the commentary about jihad and taking it to other countries. It's unbelievable. And this is, the United States.
It is. And the fear and concern also exists within the Muslim community.
Absolutely.
In the U.S., here in Chicago, where I live, very, very sadly, a 6-year-old Muslim boy was stabbed to death by an angry man, simply because this child was Muslim. Tried to kill his mother as well.
Right.
Fortunately, she survived. But so it goes both ways, and it's really hard to see that.
Yeah. It's especially painful for all of us when we know people who have worked on peace together between Israelis and Palestinians, and they have become victims. I know just before the war broke out, the D family, who were a mother and daughter driving in their car, were shot to death, and they actually had been participants at Root Shorashim Judah, who I've known for many years, a peace organization of Israeli settlers and Palestinians. I just spoke with Dr. Gideon Elazar from Roots, there, Judea and Samaria, and will hear what's going on since the war started. And we were notified that one of the alumni from Hands of Peace is one of the kidnapped victims. Also, Hands of Peace is an organization that gets together Israeli, Palestinian, and American high school students to meet every summer in San Diego and Chicago and have dialogue about the conflict. I'm sure you're hearing those stories as well. Have you heard whether or not any of your friends who participate, whether or not their organizations are pausing or continuing? I know a lot of my organizations I speak with say now is more important than ever to let people know that people actually do work on peace there together, Israelis and Palestinians, and have friendships. And there are many pockets of peace throughout the region. It's just that you never hear about it on the news.
Yeah, and I would say too that right now I think it's probably very hard for some of these groups and organizations to just go about business as usual.
Yes, yeah,
and when
true.
you're entering into dialogue with those who may see events differently than you, this is going to be a very, very difficult time to try to do that.
Yeah,
given just how emotionally charged everything is at the moment. So, sometimes I think it's okay if you just take a seat back and pause for a bit. And to just process before you enter, I guess you could say, back into the ring. Though it should not be a boxing match, but you get the metaphor. These are difficult conversations to have at times, and so I think it can be okay to
it's
take
a
break.
natural human response. I know when we in 2014 when we were there and a similar surprise situation happened, I'm looking at my 13-year-old son's eyes and just terrified. And you feel the percussion of the bombs explode, which thankfully was Iron Dome, which is Israel's defense system that blows up the missiles in the air so that they don't have a chance to land, and is also why there's such a marked difference between in the West Bank or deaths and injuries in Israel when something happens and when there are the skirmishes and what happens in the Palestinian territories.
I'll say this just too, as a documentarian, one of the things that we've learned is you have to let things play out and get to, as best as you can, get to the facts, get to what's actually happened versus someone's perception about what happened. We saw this, of course, recently with the hospital that many claimed. In fact, I think Al Jazeera, within minutes of the event, was reporting that Israel had struck a hospital and of course killed, I think the number is 500 or so. And then, of course, as time went on, it became apparent that this was not a missile from Israel, but it was a failed rocket launch from Hamas.
Correct.
There was major news outlets here in the U.S. who were reporting it as Israel had done it.
Right.
And it doesn't seem that the facts line up to that.
No,
so
and
I think it's important to pause and to not jump to conclusions too quickly.
Absolutely. In fact, that was in my article as well today about that and how it's been proven that it wasn't Israel, that it was Hamas, as exactly as you said, a failed rocket killing them. And
I wish everyone believed that.
And they won't believe it now. That's what's so sad, because once that's out there, and there's so much anger anyway, it is really scary because it's really spreading to other Arab countries as well.
Yeah, it is. And this is why we have some of the Arab countries, who aren't willing to take a stand on the issue. They're trying to play it cool, be neutral. And I would say this is not a time to be neutral. This is a time to be courageous and to stand up and say what needs to be said. I feel like there's, unfortunately, at the moment, a lack of clarity and leadership on the Arab side. I do think some of the Arab leaders need to come right out and say what Hamas did was categorically wrong and should not have been done, but they've been pretty quiet.
Well, Abbas waited a very long time, said something, and then retracted it.
Yeah.
And also, the other thing in my article is the fact that immediately, because they have the slave for pay policy, which means that terrorists are paid by the PA if they kill Jews. And the more Jews killed, the higher the pay. And they said that these terrorists who did these atrocities, immediately they've already allocated almost $3 million to their remaining families. And these are people, a lot of them who are poor, don't have jobs, and they've turned terrorism into really their own people. I think your work exposes many facts that just don't get covered on the news. Why did you decide to make Hope in the Holy Land? If you don't mind killing yourself or being killed, you'll know that you'll go to heaven and your families will be taken care of the rest of their lives and live a much better life than they do today, if only you do a terrorist act. And it's beyond comprehension.
It is. This
in
is
civilized society, but it is what happens, and it is what happened with our funds that we send to the PA. I believe that's been stopped, or at least partially been stopped. That is what is happening today but with the funds that they're giving, they're paying terrorists.
This is the sick ideology that so many of them have been indoctrinated with.
Yes. I
You
mean,
know,
they're taught in schools that Jews are not even human, that they're animals.
Yeah, the ones
And
who did this on October 11th, they've been groomed for this
7th.
since the day they were born.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. So, but I did want to show a little clip. It's been so inspiring that the work that different groups have done with Israelis and Palestinians, that in certain areas, it definitely, so far, thank goodness, has held. I'd like to show a clip that was sent to us by a friend, Phil Saunders of Path of Hope and Peace. And over the years, they built a strong relationship with the West Bank towns of Husan, which used to be one of the worst violent terrorist places as far as Palestinian towns. So there's Husan, there's Beitar Illit, which is an ultra-Orthodox Jewish town in the West Bank. They prefer to be called the biblical name of Judea and Samaria. And Sur Hadassah, which is close to the border between the West Bank and Israel. And it's a town, the Jews there are all denominations, but many are secular. And we published that interview. We've interviewed him before, but we published that on October 10th and updated it before it was broadcast, since the war had just broken out. And we stay in touch all the time. And he sent a little clip, and I wanted to play that to show here the war has already started, and this is what's happening in their local village. Sur Hadassah is in Israel, but it's very close to the border, and the other two towns I talked about are in the West Bank.
2 o'clock in the afternoon of the 16th of October 2023, and I'm at the entrance to the town of Husan, where everything is quiet. The gate is closed because the army have imposed a general closure on the West Bank. But you'll see that there are no soldiers here at all. And that's because, obviously, the army needs to be dealing with all kinds of other problems. And they know that here, we are preserving the peace. And so, as best as possible, things are continuing. You can see an ultra-Orthodox Jew, presumably from Beit Ha'Orlit there, and they're still carrying on with whatever we can in this area. But most importantly, it's what you don't see, and that is we are all working very hard to keep the peace in this area. We do not want the war to spill over to our area, and so we are keeping the peace.
So, seeing that, do you have any comments?
Yeah, that is what Israel and the territories look like almost every day. And in fact, the majority of the territories within Israel, that's what it's always like. It's only in very small pockets do you have tension and occasional disruption. And of course, now it's a little bit different than Gaza right now. But listen, for the last 2 years, the border between Gaza and Israel was relatively quiet. Now I know there were some rocket attacks, very, very few, since the last major uproar back in May of 2021. But this is Israel. This is life in the territories,
right?
And this is what people don't see. And for the most part, most Israelis and Palestinians coexist. You've got 80,000 Palestinians who come into Israel every day to work at Israeli businesses, some Arab Israeli businesses and such. That's usual. That's what a normal life is like. And so it's really good to see those images. I'm not really surprised by it. It's why I've been able to, in the past, with even tour groups that I've led, been able to lead tours in the midst of some of these uprisings.
Right.
Of course, this one is certainly different.
Yes.
We need to make that very, very clear.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about next, what is the difference that you see between what's going on now and previous ones?
Yeah, what's different here, one, people had asked me, what does this compare to, in previous conflicts or previous wars that Israel has had? And at first, when I was first hearing the news, it was a surprise attack, and this was, back on October 7th. I really felt, and many in the media equated it with the Yom Kippur War back in 1973. In fact, this attack was done on the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. And so I saw some similarities there. But then as information began to become known about what had happened, I was thinking, no, this isn't the Yom Kippur War. This is worse than that. In the Yom Kippur War, 2,700 Israeli soldiers died. Not one civilian in that war was killed. Not one. This is completely different. We have 1,400, I think 11 or 1,200 of the 1,400 who were massacred on the 7th were civilians.
Yeah.
As we know, children, babies, grandmothers, and such. That doesn't compare. I thought I could compare it too. I heard some people say this is Israel's 9/11. I thought about that. Yeah, in some ways. But you know what? On 9/11, our citizens here, the civilians here in the United States, who were killed, they were killed by 17 terrorists who hijacked planes. There was no face-to-face really contact between the perpetrators and their victims, except with maybe the plane that went down in Pennsylvania and those who were on the planes who had to face those terrorists. But the majority of those who died on 9/11, they never saw the person who killed them. They didn't even know it was coming. That's very different than those who were massacred in Israel. It was cold blood, face-to-face type contact.
And it was worse
brutal.
than that. They were so pleased with themselves and so happy about what they did. It just is evil what they
It
did.
is pure
And I
evil.
don't use that word, but I don't know how else to describe doing what they did to people and even corpses.
And reveling in it. That's
Yes.
just.
I did want to ask you, what do you think when you hear people say this is merely resistance?
When they say it's resistance, I want to ask them, resistance of what? Okay, is this resistance of the occupation, or is this the resistance of Israel itself, the existence of Israel? And what you find with many of them is it's the resistance of Israel's right to exist. That's a problem. In fact, let's be honest too about Gaza's quote unquote occupation. Israel withdrew from there in 2005. There hasn't been an Israeli citizen in Gaza since 2005 or an IDF soldier. Certainly, there's been some restrictions. Nevertheless, they've received billions of dollars in aid. And where has it gone for the last 18 years? Clearly to some people's pockets, because a few of the Hamas leaders are billionaires, and it's not because they have come up with some interesting invention to make a lot of money off of. So they're pocketing the money and they're using it to fund their campaign for Israel's destruction. So, when people talk about resistance, it's really hard to accept that. They say, you've said this before, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I think they mean what they say. And so that's incredibly concerning. It's very clearly still what Hamas wants to do, and others who sympathize with Hamas. And that's why Israel needs to do what it has to do to completely eliminate and get rid of Hamas's stronghold within Gaza.
Oh, I wanted to also hear what is going on with both your film and you also have a new series. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so since the conflict, this war started on October 7th, our film, which released in 2021 and received a lot of accolades and a lot of people watched it. But like most films, after a few months, viewership dies down. Well, that changed significantly on October 7th. And over these last several days, we've had more views of the film than since the film released 2 years ago.
Well,
So
mazel tov for that, but it's a horrible.
Yeah, I wish there
reason.
was another reason for the views to be happening right now. But it is good to know that our film is providing some clarity, I think, for people who have been confused about the conflict. I mean, we did make the film to begin with to provide that type of clarity and historical context for people who have either been misinformed or they're just ignorant about the subject. And so it's nice to see that there are people who want to get educated. And because our film does provide hope, we do provide stories of both Jews and Arabs who are breaking down walls and building bridges to coexist in peace. People need to see that right now. And we need to all remember that those people are there, and those are the people who truly, really do need our support in this time.
That is obviously the purpose of my platform of Peace with Penny, to get the word out that there is hope. And it's so beautiful. The Israelis and Palestinians that I speak with who work with one another, they do it from environment and scientists and high schoolers and young people and educators and art and music and so many different ways that peace is worked on there. And it's just beautiful. And many of them have had relatives lost and fought in the war and had to really change their viewpoint and finally realize that, hey, Jews are not going away from Israel and the Palestinians are not going away. And in the West Bank or Gaza for that fact. And violence only begets violence. And it does no good. It's ineffective. It's costly in extremely painful ways beyond financial. And they just have to come to the realization that they have to learn how to get along. And these people already have. And do you plan on adding any episodes to your series now that this has happened regarding the war?
It's slated to be a 6 episode series. We released the pilot episode on September 1st of this year. The plan is to continue to work on the remaining episodes. The second episode, interestingly, was slated to be focused on Gaza.
No kidding.
If you're watching this, you haven't seen the first episode, it is available for free on our YouTube channel. Unlike the film that you got to pay a few bucks to watch. But
it's great. They're all great. Like I said in the beginning, I was so impressed with the fair presentation of both sides. But it is wonderful that you've taken all of your skills to do so.
Yeah, thank you, Penny.
Is there anything else that you want to add before we conclude?
Listen, I'm a Christian, and I believe God has made some very clear promises regarding Israel.
Fabulous. Do you plan on? Sorry.
Yeah, I want to just affirm everything you're saying. Yeah, they really are amazing people, and again, they continue to. They need our support, and those are the stories that need to be told, especially in a time like this.
Yeah. Which is, again, what I do. But I wish it was under different circumstances, but it has been for almost 3 years. I've been working on this peace work for 9 years, between writing the book and public speaking, and now almost 3 years for Peace with Penny. But I really fell in love with these various organizations and want to do my best for them to be able to spread the word. I wish I knew how to do the marketing better so that to get the word out. And if anybody wants to give me some advice, let me know. But
if you're watching this right now, support what Penny's doing. There's not enough people like Penny who have a heart for this, and so support her work. It's very important work. And
thank you,
Penny. Just want you to know I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
And his faithfulness to the people of Israel. In Jeremiah 31, which is actually the verse that I have, or the chapter I have written underneath the Kesher Project, the organization that I lead, God makes it very clear that as long as the sun and the moon and the stars continue to shine, Israel will forever be a nation before me. And to think that was written 2,500 plus years ago, and all of the ancient peoples that existed at that time, they're no longer with us. But here Israel remains. And so I really do believe that God is going to continue to be faithful to the people of Israel, no matter what they go through during these very, very dark days. They will get through this. They will survive. And I guess I should end that with saying, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live.
Yes, thank you so much. It's, as always, a pleasure, and I can't wait to see your next episode whenever that gets done.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, and stay in touch, please.
For sure. Thank you, Penny. Yeah. And his faithfulness to the people of Israel. In Jeremiah 31, which is actually the verse that I have, or the chapter I have written underneath the Kesher Project, the organization that I lead, God makes it very clear that as long as the sun and the moon and the stars continue to shine, Israel will forever be a nation before me. And to think that was written 2,500 plus years ago, and all of the ancient peoples that existed at that time, they're no longer with us. But here Israel remains. And so I really do believe that God is going to continue to be faithful to the people of Israel, no matter what they go through during these very, very dark days. They will get through this. They will survive. And I guess I should end that with saying, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live.
Well, we had been observing that there was some other films and media that had been created that was painting Israel as the unjust oppressors of the Palestinians, as colonialist invaders, setting up an apartheid state of separating Jews from Arabs. And we just really sensed that from our experience, both Todd and I, we've been leading tours to Israel for years, and we've gotten very well acquainted with Israel and Israelis, and to some extent, with the Palestinians. We just didn't really feel like that was fairly characterizing Israel and the conflict itself. And so we sensed that there needed to be a more fair and balanced film on the subject. And so we set out to hopefully make the most fair and balanced film on this issue that's ever been made. That was kind of our goal, which is a pretty lofty goal if you think about the subject matter that we were dealing with. And thankfully, the feedback that we've gotten from a lot of people who have viewed it, experts on the subject, have affirmed that, yeah, I think you guys made the best film that's ever been made on this issue. So that felt great, but it was really this whole distortion of the conflict, distortion of Israel's story, that really motivated us to want to set out and put Todd on a journey, kind of a continued journey. Todd had made a film prior to this one called Promised Land, Israel Through the Eyes of Surfers, which captures his friendship with an Israeli surfboard shaper. Todd's a surfer himself. And that was also used kind of as a vehicle to tell more of Israel's story. Mm-hmm. And so this put him on a journey of wanting to not only learn more just about the conflict, but also about the Palestinians, about people that often within, at least I can say within the Christian community, we don't talk about as much. The Christian community historically has been very supportive of Israel, the reestablishment of Jewish people to their homeland, but doesn't talk as much about the Arabs who live in that land. And so we wanted to gain more of a heart, we would say more of God's heart for the Arabs who live there. So that's a bit of the background of what brought us to the point of making the film.
Very similar to what got me to do what I do after our trip and coming home and hearing how Israel's portrayed, and having gone through what I had with the bomb shelters and hearing how Israel, before they bomb anybody, they send flyers and call the houses and tell them to leave, and their leaders tell them to stay and become martyrs, etc. It made me crazy. So,
yeah.
Well, at least that's what I was blaming
too.
It on. So I wrote the book and became a speaker, and now I have Peace with Penny. When exactly did you film it, and how long did it take to film?
Yeah, our first filming trip was in 2016. And then we did 2 subsequent trips in 2017 and 18. And I think there were a couple of domestic interviews that we did in 2019. We targeted May 14th of 2021, May 14th because that's the Gregorian calendar, the anniversary of Israel's independence. Of course, what Palestinians would call the Nakba, the catastrophe. And so we just felt like that would be a good release date, not knowing at that time that just 2 or 3 days before that, there would be another flare-up of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, more specifically between Israel and Hamas.
Was your crystal ball at the shop?
It was one of those divinely, I guess you could say, orchestrated releases.
It seems to be.
And so that certainly helped put a little bit more attention on the film, which, from a filmmaker's point is a good thing.
Right.
We would want there to be a different reason, though, for it to get attention. We wouldn't want to see conflict be the reason for that.
Does the current violence impact what you're working on the series now?
I know this past year there's been a tremendous amount of terrorism. A lot of Israeli civilians murdered in cold blood. We just released the first episode of a 6-part series, and we haven't made the next 5. So we laid out what we want to do, and so then there'll be 5 more episodes that we're trying to raise funds for. So if you enjoy the first episode, well, hey, give to help make episodes 2 through 5 happen. And we're really excited about feedback that we've been getting from viewers who seem to really, really appreciate the content of this first episode.
Showed it at the San Diego Film Festival. It actually, I think it won there.
Although all the Jewish people who see it, Penny, yourself included, they seem to really enjoy it. I mean, we've gotten great endorsements from Michael Oren, former ambassador from Israel to the U.S., Yossi Klein Halevi, who's written really one of the best books about the conflict, Letters to My Palestinian Neighbor.
Right.
He loved the film. One of the great Israeli historians, Daniel Gordis, has endorsed the film.
Yes, I know him well.
And some rabbis have endorsed. Granted, is a Christian audience. I mean, that's kind of what motivated us to make it, because of changing attitudes and perspectives within the Christian community regarding Israel. But from what we've learned from our Jewish friends, is there's also that shift happening within the Jewish community. And so what we provided in the film can also help educate Jewish people.
Shift, what is that shift?
Just the shift of supporting a shift away from supporting Israel's right to exist as the sovereign Jewish state of the Jewish people, towards embracing a narrative that would say that Israel doesn't have rightful ownership to that territory, that they're colonialist invaders, that they're an apartheid state.
That's what the Jewish community, you believe, is shifting to?
From what we've been told, the younger generation is embracing more of this idea that Israel took land away, stole land from innocent Palestinians, and are continuing to oppress the Palestinian people. So that narrative is being embraced more and more so by not just Christians, but by Jews, non-Jews, wherever. That's becoming a more popular narrative, which we
that's definitely the Palestinian narrative, but
but you could also see that happening within. It's kind of like a global scale of it's kind of like a self-hate global scale. Younger Americans don't want to be American because they're hearing a narrative that is so awful, and they need to repent and all this stuff. And so there's some truth to some of those stories, but I think it's a broader story it's a broader narrative going on in the world, it seems like.
It's also, now I have great sympathy for the Palestinian narrative, but I also have great sympathy for the Israeli narrative. And I'd say, look at the U.S. I would never believe the U.S., my thoughts of the U.S. growing up, certainly over the last few years, have been challenged as to what I thought it was, or even ethics. We were raised lying is wrong. And what I've noted all over the place is some folks don't have a problem lying. And if they say it enough, then that viewpoint is accepted as truth. And it's sad. And I would say that the Palestinian educational system and what they promote is very horrific in terms of Jews, and they're not even human, and that they intentionally kill children, etc. I know there's also people who are Israelis who hate the other side and so on, and with all the terrorist attacks. But there's unfortunately a lot of people who basically listen to what I consider propaganda.
Yeah, we would agree.
The sides promoting what they want to be told. And people, unfortunately, don't take the time, because nobody has enough time, to look further. And so what your film and series is doing is such a service.
We allowed people on both sides to share their perspectives.
Right.
Also understanding too that there's not just two perspectives. There's multiple perspectives.
Oh my goodness. And within each of the,
we can't just assume that all Palestinians speak with the same voice, or that they all agree with each other.
No, or Jews. I mean, there's always the standard joke: if you have two Jews, you'll have three opinions. And in today's world, I'd say you probably will have 7 opinions.
We see what's happening, and people always want to go beyond the what, and they want to know why it's happening. Unfortunately, I think some people have been fed certain narratives or answers that don't really truly give the accurate why. Part of what you're going to get in our film that you may not get in other films about this subject is we're going to bring religious ideology into it. So what is some of the theology behind the ideology that some of these people have? I think it's a big mistake to say that that religion has nothing to do with this conflict. That it's just a geopolitical, that it's just a geopolitical kind of, it's a fight over land. No, it goes much deeper than that. And when you spend time with people, you will find that oftentimes there's some kind of a religious, spiritual kind of ideology that motivates them to hold particular views. And so that's definitely one part you're going to get in this film that you may not get in other films on the subject.
Who do you think are the greatest supporters of your film, and why?
The greatest supporters? That's a really good question.
Nobody's asked me that.
It's those who support Israel's right to exist, because we do make a strong case that the Jewish people have a right to be there. Whether you agree with some of Israel's policies as they affect the Palestinian people, we firmly believe that this is the historical homeland of the Jewish people.
Where can you see the film today?
Yeah, the film is available on most streaming services. So Prime Video, Apple TV, Google Play, Vudu, YouTube. So the easiest way to just access any of those platforms is to just go to our website. And additionally, we have a resource page as well. We think we've made a great go-to film, but there's some other great resources too. We've put that on our resource page for others who kind of want to go deeper, or they want to learn more.
Cool. So what was the response? What happened with your film over the last couple of years? Hinted at the response may not have been as much as you would have liked with all your efforts that you put together, but what happened?
Which is probably what most filmmakers say about their films. But so yeah, I mean, there's been some churches and some schools who have hosted screenings. Definitely not as many as we would have liked. But the cool thing is that they can still do that. For some churches, I mean, they in synagogues, maybe they want to avoid some of the political, issues, and they don't, hot button issues. A lot of times religious organizations or groups, they'll try to avoid it just because they want to, make everyone kind of happy, or they don't want to make them uncomfortable. But honestly, I think it's probably because they haven't watched the film yet. Because I think if you watch the film, you realize we are being sensitive to people on both sides of the political spectrum.
Right. A lot of people have made their decision about the conflict, and getting them to look further. I mean, what I do, I mean, in my own family, I'll hear, why are you wasting your time? Peace is never going to happen there. And, I'll say, have you listened to any of my interviews? Peace happens today. There's pockets of peace and have been for 20 years. It's just, it doesn't make the news. It's, if it bleeds, it leads, and all you see is them killing each other. But there's so many inspiring stories and peace organizations working together, and they do it from every which way. I mean, you have the same, I think people, or most people, already have their opinions about the situation. They've tried to move past the conflict because it's ugly, and it's ugly to look at, and everybody's got enough stress in their life. I don't know if yeah.
I wanted to say, though, we did talk about awards, what it won in the Jewish community in San Diego, but it also won the International Christian Visual Media Award, which is like in Christian media, it's like the Golden Globe Award. So
wonderful.
It took gold in that, and it's won other awards as well. And I think I've heard personal testimonies. I believe from the ones that I'm referring to are specifically from Christians. I'm thinking of one really important one to me was a South African girl who is a Christian, but she really she had bought into the Palestinian narrative, and South Africa, from what I understand, South Africa is very anti-Zionist. So all that was accumulating, and she was working in Jordan with Palestinians, and God used our film to, she watched our film, and she has a heart today for Israelis. That was an absolute bullseye for Justin and I, because we made the film to speak to Christians, not only to Christians who already love Israel and to challenge them to love the Palestinians, but for those Christians who are on the fence about Israel or have even crossed that into hating Israel because of what they think they've done to the Palestinians. We wanted to win those people back over with truth and with stories. And it has done that to people who have given it a chance, which is really phenomenal, I think.
Yes, that's fabulous. And it's a huge issue. One of the testimonials I read was very cool, from Colonel Richard Kemp, former chief of command of the British forces in Afghanistan, said, if there is one film you're going to watch to understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Hope in the Holy Land is it. I mean, that was very cool. And that,
go watch it.
from well, I have several times, but
I know, I'm talking to your audience.
Now you're working on the series, and it looks like you're doing some fundraising, which you mentioned. Is that Philos or Project and the Jerusalem Institute of Justice were your partners in the film? Did they sponsor it to the fact that they financially helped you?
Yeah, so the Philos Project was one of the main financial backers of the film. So a good portion of the film was financed by them. The other portion just from individual donors. And so with the series, the Philos Project at this point hasn't been able to make a contribution towards the series. So we're looking primarily to, I guess you could say, crowdfunding. So, anyone who wants to help bring this film to fruition, they can do that through a gift of $25 or more. Each episode costs $15,000 to make. For some, that might sound like a lot. I can tell you this, in the visual media world, that's actually very inexpensive. Hopefully people will watch it and then decide, hey, I want to see more of this, and they can make a contribution through our website.
Personally, What is it that drove you to this, both of you? I mean, doing this kind of work is not easy and takes a lot of dedication. What made you cross the line that you said you just had to do this?
For me, I would say God gave me a heart for the Jewish people really, really when I was very young, like preteens. And so Israel, Jewish people, and the land has always been important to me. And a part of that was making Promised Land. And after that, Justin talked a little bit about that. We began to, Justin was sharing with me after he saw Promised Land and we became friends. He was sharing with me about some of these other films that have been made within the Christian community, the evangelical community that have been very anti-Israel and biased against Israel. And that alone was what motivated me to want to make another film, because I know what film can do, and I know that people can experience and see and believe, and their hearts and minds can be changed. That was the initial reason. And then time went on, I was personally challenged to gain God's heart for the Palestinians. And it was a spot in my heart that I realized, ooh, yeah, I don't have God's heart for the Palestinians, and I need that. So it was a long journey of seeking that and inviting others into that as well, and sharing this journey of truth. You know, just because you're seeking to love somebody doesn't mean you certainly don't throw truth out the window, right? That doesn't mean you buy one narrative over another.
Sure.
You're weighing it, and you're seeing what's truth and what it seems to be not truth. So those were the two motivating factors for me.
Justin?
Yeah, and for me, several years ago, I learned about the history of Christian anti-Semitism. There was a book that I read, written by Dr. Michael Brown, titled "Our Hands Are Stained with Blood," and you got a lot into the history of, frankly, just how the church, the Christian church, just had a really poor public relations policy regarding the Jewish people, and justified a lot of oppression towards the Jewish people from just really bad theology. And what I was seeing is this movement of what we have mentioned as anti-Zionism. Another way of saying it might be delegitimizing the Jewish people's right to sovereignty within their ancestral homeland. Okay, so that's when we talk about what is anti-Zionism. It's anti-Semitism used to be kind of, we don't want you Jews living in our land. Now it's kind of become, we don't want you Jews living in your land. And so I just kind of feel like anti-Zionism is just really kind of the new morphing or mutation of anti-Semitism.
It is.
Wherever there's anti-Zionism, it seems like there's anti-Semites right behind, or it's anti-Semites who are leading the way. And so I just really felt like, hey, we need to, as Christians, we can't make the same mistake again. And so we need to stand up and do something here. And as Todd has already said, film, media, it's one of the key ways in order to inform people, to educate people. And so it just seemed right that we set out to try to get this film done. And, we've seen God use it. We pray that God continues to use it. And we're grateful, Penny, that there's people like yourself who believe in the work that we're doing.
Absolutely. I think one thing that some people wouldn't be that aware of is that there are Palestinian Christians. And if you could speak a little bit about that, because they face some discrimination amongst the Muslims, as I understand it, and a lot of folks have left. When I talked to you last, you're talking about that. Other issues like Muslims won't sell land to them, etc. Can you talk a little bit about that segment of the Palestinian population?
I think Cleve Meyer said it in the film, Palestinian Christians are really between a rock and a hard place because they're a minority within the Palestinian society, which is vastly Muslim background. And so yeah, second-class citizens, they can't buy land from Muslims. I guess Muslims cannot sell land to them. And so they're in a really hard place. Yet, I think what becomes very difficult for them is they're Palestinians. So, it's much easier for them to believe the Palestinian narrative that they're hearing than rather than look outside of the box and reach across the line and meet Israelis for yourself or for themselves and make those decisions. I would say the majority of Palestinian Christians, unfortunately, still hold to a replacement theology because the Jews rejected Jesus. They're no longer a part of God's plan. It's been given to the church, which when they say the church, it means pretty much Gentiles. And that means the land is not theirs either. So you could see how that would fuel in a very negative way how Palestinian Christians would think towards Israel just on a theological perspective. Now add that to everything they're hearing 24/7 about the other side. It's like it's just gas on the fire. So yeah, it's really unfortunate because that theology Justin talked about it in that book, Our Hands Are Stained with Blood, which is actually it was one of the reasons why I made the film too, because of Christian anti-Semitism. And it's a terrible theology. It's absolutely terrible. It doesn't have grounding in scripture at all. It's just, and the fruit of it has been horrific. So yeah, that's, and there are a few Palestinian, a number of Palestinian Christians that would not buy into that theology. And those are some of the ones that you hear in the film who are speaking differently about Israel. They're speaking with God's heart about Israel, and there's a huge difference you can tell in the way they talk and the way they act and the way they feel towards Palestinians.
And unfortunately, it's very hard for them to speak out, to speak publicly about it, because there's just tremendous persecution that they receive. And by persecution, I'm not just talking about, getting called some words or maybe losing your job, but actually potentially losing your life.
That's true. It's the anti-normalization.
And so we're going to have more of that, address some of that in one of the episodes coming up in the series.
It's pretty horrible. I run into those kinds of issues all the time, speaking with peace organizations. And I've learned over time also all the trigger words. Oh my goodness. Like when you mention Zionist, for a Jew of my age, growing, if you're Jewish, you're a Zionist. That means that you care about Israel and believe it's your homeland and it has a right to exist. And every service we face Jerusalem. It isn't foreign to us. It is, Israel is part of everything. Yet the Palestinians have made Zionist a trigger word of
redefined
claiming
it as
ethnic
a racist,
cleansing and
colonialist invader.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing the job they've done. I mean, you think about today and what you're describing. I mean, we saw it personally. The further we got away from Israel, Israel proper, on the, not into the West Bank, not into Judea or Samaria, the further we got away from it into those areas of the West Bank or Judea, Samaria, the more heated that word became. Jerusalem was already, East Jerusalem that's where we began to see it. But in Israel proper, not really. I mean, we some of the interviews that you'll see in the film of Arabs who, love doing business with Israelis, and they recognize Israel as an amazing state, but they live in a free society, unlike those under the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, and they get paid so much more actually having a job when they work in Israel is something compared to being at home and there are no jobs available.
Yeah, which is unfortunate that they have to. It's unfortunate that they even have to enter into Israel to get paid as well as they do. I mean, when you consider all of the foreign dollars that have been given and to the Palestinian Authority, and you look at what have they done with those, not just millions of dollars, we're talking billions of dollars. What have they done to build infrastructure and a society that's thriving?
Well,
they've done nothing with it.
Well, they've done
No,
a
they've done
lot
something.
with it,
They put it in their
actually.
pockets.
Something, yeah.
Not besides that. Now, were you familiar with and about the different terrorist acts, the missiles and the stabbings and the shootings and the incendiary kites before you made your film, or were those things you discovered as you learned?
I think most of the stuff we're familiar with, because you can, if you care about Israel and you're educated about this, you know that stuff because it's been talked about. For me, it was verifying it. Like the knifing attacks, for example. Well, that was pretty, I had heard that. And so we started talking to people about that. And and the narrative on the street in the Palestinian territories was that those people aren't killing Jews. The IDF wants to have a little fun and they shoot a Palestinian and put a knife under him. It's that crazy, and they all believe this.
The knifing attacks were fabricated. Yeah.
To the point where you're thinking, like, what, did I miss something? Where am I? What is going on? Is it made up? You tend to think like, could it be made up? It's not.
No. You've described the Palestinian Authority as an oppressive regime against their own people. I mean,
by the way, that's described by some Palestinians that we met and spoke with. So we just happen to agree with them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they haven't had elections in I don't know how many years. Did you speak to folks who were against them, therefore? Just their narratives and the fact that they supply these salaries and stuff. Did you get a feeling that not supporting the Palestinian Authority was in the minority, or it's all over the board?
It's definitely in the minority. At least publicly, it's the minority.
Right. Publicly.
I think there are many Palestinians who are very frustrated with their leadership, frustrated that they haven't had elections in I don't know how many years. It's probably getting close to
it's got to be like
20
17,
years
18.
now.
I don't know, 19, something like that.
But even those who are frustrated with that, it's like, well, who do we even have to vote for? Who is speaking a message of peace? Who's speaking a message of we're here and we want to help make your lives truly better? I don't think they have that leadership right now, and so I think there's a tremendous amount of despair within Palestinian society of Israel. This is from their own leaders.
Absolutely, but there could be more hope for peace if they just listen to the different peace organizations that are there amongst the leaders on both sides.
Gratefully have been able to capture many of those people in our film and in the upcoming series. And Penny, we just really appreciate your support of that. And thanks for the work that you're doing.
Thanks. What gives you hope?
Just some of the people that we met and spoke with who really do have an appreciation for their neighbor, whether they're Jewish or Arab, that there's actual real friendships and cooperation that exists that rarely, if ever, gets highlighted in the media. But those people are there, and those people need more of our time and attention, and they need a greater voice, volume to their voice, and that's what you'll get through watching our film. You'll get to hear their voices. And so it's those people who give me hope for the future.
Well, that is what I work on every day, is those folks who not only talk to each other, but work on peace. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for your time and for helping tell the truth about the complexities that both Israelis and Palestinians face living so closely together. Let's close with the hope that everyone will someday live in peace, shalom, and salam.